Next, we have anxiety. So this phase occurs at the next level of intensity. So instead of the baseline phase, your learner or your student might be exhibiting the following signs of behavior escalation. Their eyes might be looking all around. They might be covering their ears, squinting their eyes. Stimulatory behaviors might be more intense. Maybe they're pounding the desk. Or the learner might engage in louder vocalizations or vocalizations in general. Or they might be slower to respond. So think of a student or a learner that you work with and think of what this phase might look like for them. Let's say the strategies implemented aren't working. The next phase of escalation is defensive. What happens at this phase? The learner might display some of the following. There might be verbal protest, saying or shaking their head no. There might be some non-compliance, walking or turning in the opposite direction, or refusing a certain task. They might grab. It's not going to be super intense, but they might grab to let you know, hey, I'm going to challenge you right now. They might be sitting out of their current designated spot. What happens after that? Behavior is going to accelerate, meaning it's not de-escalating, it's going to get a little bit more intense. Protests may increase in intensity. Elopement might actually occur. Grabbing arms or clothing while standing. So typically in the defensive stage or phase, we might still see that the learner is sitting still. If they have the ability to stand during the acceleration stage, we might see, in addition to grabbing, that learner or that student might be standing as well. This is a higher level of intensity that we want to be mindful of. Property destruction might occur. And then, of course, the peak of the behavioral escalation is what's known as risk behavior. And some examples of this are high intensity aggression towards one or more staff and or peers. Elopement might be occurring to an area that's unsafe. Self-injury might be occurring. And this self-injury would be intense enough to leave marks and bruising. Property destruction. Now they're throwing items that could actually hurt somebody else or themselves. So for each individual, this looks different, but I want you to think of some of those aggressive learners that you work with or individuals that have extreme behaviors and think of what their peak or what their highest intensity level of behavior will look like. This now, we're going back down on the phase of escalation. We're not completely de-escalated yet, but that next step right after that peak phase or most intense phase of escalation is responsive. At this point, you might see that the learner is actually responding to your presence, whether that be eye contact or their body language is cooperative. So instead of turned away, they might be now facing you. They might be walking instead of running, sitting instead of standing. Their hands might be folded together. They might be maintaining a proximity that you're comfortable with. So if they were eloping or charging towards you, now they are maintaining a safe proximity. And they might be responding to prompts that you are giving for them to use coping strategies. Maybe they're taking some deep breaths, or maybe they're simply folding their hands. Next, we have compliant. So after responsive, we might see that we're starting to gain back some compliance. What does that look like? We might see some communication. Verbal and or nonverbal communication might be happening. Maybe responding to demands, such as pick up what you just threw. They might be starting to return to their designated work location. They might be showing a willingness to imitate simple steps of compliance. I like to do what I call a compliance check before I know that a learner is ready to go back to work or ready to be safe. I like to do some imitative responses such as touch nose, tap head, pull, touch ear, squeeze hands. right? For some of those higher functioning learners, you might be able to ask questions. What color shirt am I wearing? What is on your shirt? What is your brother's name? Okay, so you want to check for compliance and really have a solid understanding of whether or not you're going to be able to transition back into that learning and hopefully get back to that baseline level of behavior. At the end of the phases of escalation, we might see a decrease in energy. This phase is called tension reduction. So examples of what we might see are some physical examples. Maybe the eyes are starting to close. They might be a little glazed over. The learner might be slouching in their seat. They might be yawning. They might be apologizing using sign language or verbal communication. We might see tears or vocalizations that sound like crying. And they might be engaging in coping strategies and also requesting for basic needs. If there's not a request for basic needs, please remember during this phase, we need to check on their basic needs. And this might be another way to reestablish that rapport and to try to gain some compliance and see where that student or learner is at. Now, we've been through all the phases of escalation for the learner. We are now going to talk about how do we respond to each phase as the teacher or as the staff member. Again, we have 1 through 8, 1 being baseline, 5 being the most risky, and 8 being the tension reduction. So at each phase, what is the best effective way for staff to intervene? During the first 3 phases, we have baseline, anxiety, defensive. I'm going to allow you to take a minute and read through some of those bullet points. At the baseline phase, there's no need to do anything extra. However, sometimes people think that they want to maximize that work time, which is beneficial sometimes. You need to really know your learner if you're going to do that. Because I always say it's better to end while you're ahead. Baseline phase, make sure that you're reinforcing that appropriate behavior. You want to think ahead also and plan what might happen. Always be ready for what might occur. Anxiety phase, something easy to do is offer choices. Remind them what they're working for. A simple redirection of what they're working for so that they know the work they're putting in is going to be rewarded. At the defensive phase, at that point, we want to refrain from offering specific things because that might be considered bribery. We don't want to reinforce defensive behavior, but it does depend on what it looks like. But at this point, we see that they're starting to get agitated. We're going to want to minimize our verbal input. We're going to want to really pay attention to our voice volume and our body language. We want to communicate that we are there to help and support them. We are not there to upset them or to throw more work at them. At this phase, we really need to be the supportive role. And we can prompt for communication by simply asking, what do you need? Or how can I help you? If it goes up into that next phase, acceleration, this is where we really want to be requesting additional team support. If it's not already there, ask for help. You don't want to make too big of a scene, but make sure that you're communicating with your colleagues or your peers on the fact that you might need additional support. Clear the area. Again, be thinking ahead. You want to remove items that can be thrown or destroyed and ensure that exits are not easily accessible if you have an eloper on hand. By clearing the area, I don't just mean physical items, I mean of other students or anybody else that can be hurt as well. And this helps to minimize the level of attention that's given to the behavior. Once we reach that peak behavior, hopefully at this point, you're responding according to a effective and evidence-based behavior intervention plan. At the risk behavior stage, this is where If needed, as a last resort, a team or staff might go in and use some sort of a non-violent, non-forceful hold to keep that individual safe or to keep themselves safe. And I always say, if the behavior is an immediate threat to the safety of the student or others, and the use of a nonviolent restraint such as CPI is already approved, that may be used, but remember, last resort. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can up until that point to de-escalate that behavior. Okay, during the responsive phase, we want to keep that momentum going. Remember, this is past the peak. They're now starting to show a decrease in energy. We're going to want to check for compliance at this point. Those simple commands, imitative, or what color is my hair? What color is my shirt? Hey, did you see the moon last night? What's the weather today? Model calm techniques. Make sure that you are modeling everything you want to see from your learner during the entire phase of escalation. Number 7, compliant. At this phase, we want to make sure that we're really giving verbal specific praise. I love that you have a calm body. I love that you're folding your hands right now. I like that you're looking at me. Great job sitting down. Okay, we want to prompt for communication. And then this might be a time where we consider following through with the original task. In terms of behavior, remember, we want to refrain from reinforcing whatever was happening immediately after the behavior. If they just got out of work for 30 minutes, we need to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen tomorrow, which means we might need to follow through with that work. Again, the work can be modified. You want to make sure that you're not going to re-trigger them and they go back into that peak phase of escalation. But we do want to make sure that we're following through as much as possible. Last but not least, tension reduction. We want to continue with that positive momentum. We want to check in with the student, ask them what they might need, prompt for communication. The more we prompt for communication, the more learning will take place. The more they have opportunities to communicate, the more that will transfer to the next day and hopefully help make the next person's instructional time more productive. We want to use behavior specific praise again, and this might be the time where we reintroduce the student's schedule and provide, again, positive support, all of those proactive strategies that we talked with earlier. Well, folks, that wraps up our training for today. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's long. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I can provide my contact information. And remember to take the quiz following the training. It shouldn't be too difficult, just a simple fill in the blank so that I know that you watched this video and that you got something out of it. Thank you again for listening. Good luck and best wishes to all of you. Thank you for the work that you do with our student and learner population. It's a difficult job, but it takes a very special person, and what you're doing means something. It's a very meaningful line of work. Thank you again. I hope to provide another training in the future. Take care, everybody.